What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my early thoughts ahead of the Game Week 3 deadline. So I'm going to go through some key players that I want to talk about, take a look at the price changes, then go through some of my notes from the weekend. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. And if you haven't checked out Fantasy Football Hub, there is 50% off at the moment. Links in the description below. So there's only one player we can start with, really, and that's Christopher Nkunku, who came off before the 60th minute against Man City in Game Week 1. And in Game Week 2, didn't even start against Wolves. Extremely frustrating. I've got to hold my hands up and say I got this one massively wrong. I knew that Chelsea had early midweek matches. I just expected heavy rotation, which there was. I just thought Nkunku would be part of that. I did not expect him to play in the Europa Conference League playoff match and then get benched against Wolves at the weekend. That just doesn't make any sense to me. But I guess with the number of options they also have now, that is something that Maresca can do. So hold my hands up. It was a mistake. All we can do now is talk about what we should do with him moving forwards. He has dropped in price to 6.4 million overnight. The good news is, unlike Kwanzaa last week, there's a few options you can go for less money. So if you haven't got money in the bank, it's not a complete disaster if you miss the price drop. In terms of Nkunku as an option moving forward, I think he's done. I think he's well and truly done, at least for the next few weeks. It might be that in the future it becomes an option again. Maybe Chelsea pick up a few injuries. He builds up that match fitness. He's getting plenty of minutes in the 11 for the Premier League matches. But right now, I just don't see how anyone could be confident of that happening. It seems almost inevitable that he's going to start again on Thursday and then probably be benched again at the weekend. If you have already missed the price drop, by the way, it's quite unlikely that he'll drop in price again before that match on Thursday. So you could wait and see what happens in that Chelsea European game. Maybe they pick up a few injuries and all of a sudden Nkunku's minutes look better. But I think for most people, he is done as an option. So unless you've got a bunch of other attackers you can play instead, you're probably looking to sell him. Now, in terms of the options you could go for, I bought in Smith Rowe last night. I was weighing up him versus Morgan Gibbs-White. I think Gibbs-White is probably better for Game Week 3 because he's got Wolves at home, whereas Smith Rowe's got Ipswich away, which is probably a little bit tougher. But I like Smith Rowe because of Game Weeks 4 and 5. West Ham at home, Newcastle at home. And although I've got in my team Rodgers and João Pedro who I can play instead, I didn't want to take the risk of just assuming that I could bench Gibbs-White and nothing else was going to happen to my team. So I think if I do pick up another issue or injury or something like that, and maybe it'll be Smith Rowe, right? But if it's not, I can play him in 4 and 5 with 2 home games against West Ham and Newcastle. So that's why I went for him. I do think he's the best 5.5 to bring in at the moment. The other one that people are looking at after this weekend's games is Semenyo, who's got an assist and goal in the first 2 game weeks and looked really good against Newcastle. And I like him as a player. I like him as an option. But Everton away, I mean, I've got to be honest, Everton away and Chelsea at home, next 2 games don't actually look that bad. But Everton away, Chelsea at home, Liverpool away on paper is not what you would pick. From game week 6 onwards, they got Southampton at home and Leicester away, which is decent. But then it's Arsenal, Villa, City. So I think in the short term, you just take the fixtures for Smith Rowe over someone like Semenyo. And for Brighton midfielders like Minter, he could be great, but there's a lot of competition at Brighton. And also, it's Arsenal away this week. I just don't see how you bring in a player with that fixture. It's like one of the worst you can get all season. Yes, they got Ipswich at home and Forest at home in 4 and 5. But I think you want to bring them in Game Week 4 after the international break, not beforehand. So 5.5 million midfielders is probably Smith Rowe. There's not a huge amount of options at 6 million. One player that people are looking at after he scored against Man City is Schmodix for Ipswich. He played 71 minutes. Very highly rated from the Championship. Fulham at home, Brighton away, Southampton away, Villa at home, next 4 fixtures. Pretty decent. But I'm not sure I know enough about him at Ipswich in the Premier League to kind of go for that and what his minutes will be like. But he's certainly, let me get my words out, certainly shown what he can do against Man City. So I don't mind him as a bit of a punt. Otherwise, you're probably going down to 5 million. And I think the option has to be Morgan Rodgers. I've got him in my team. I've had him since Game Week 1. He definitely looks like the best 5 million midfielder. I don't think there's really too much discussion around that. Like Buonanotte at Leicester, let me just double check what his minutes were like at the weekend because I didn't check the Leicester team. Let's have a look here. Yeah, 70 minutes. So he played 78 in Game Week 1, 70 in Game Week 2. But Rodgers has played back-to-back 90. He's also playing in a better team as well. And someone like Adama Traore at Fulham, it's just not the kind of player that I would look to bring in. So I think Rodgers is good. Leicester away, Everton at home, Wolves at home, Ipswich away, next 4. I will temper people's expectations a little bit. He has played back-to-back 90s. He's played really well. Unai Emery has bigged him up quite a lot as well. I don't see him coming out of the team, but it is possible his minutes get reduced in the future. Either he gets subbed off early, or maybe at some point he does get benched. Not permanently, but it could happen for one match, because after the international break from game week 4 onwards, like between 4 and 5, Villa have got Champions League match. And I think they've got another midweek game before between 5 and 6, and between 7 and 8, I believe it is. They got like 3 midweek games pretty quickly after the international break. So there could be a bit of rotation, but he's only 5 million. So if he doesn't start all the time, or his minutes do get reduced, it's not necessarily the end of the world. And the fixtures are there. And if he does stay in the team, which is probably what the most likely situation is right now, he's going to be an incredible option. And I like going from Nkunku to Rodgers because it gives you a lot of money to spend on other moves. If you're deciding between Rodgers and Smith Rowe, my move would probably be Rodgers. I bought in Smith Rowe because I already had Rodgers. So that's the options less than Nkunku's price. If you've got a bit of money in the bank and you're looking at 6.5 million midfielders, Madueke's come up quite a lot, obviously, since the hat-trick yesterday. He didn't even start in game week 1. He did really well. The fixtures are really good for Chelsea. I don't mind Madueke as a punt. I wouldn't guarantee his minutes. Like, Chelsea have just got so many players, and I feel like we almost need to learn from this Nkunku mistake that Madueke could be the next one. Like, he's scoring a hat-trick is going to help keep your place in the team, but it doesn't last forever. And it could even be that, like, Neto plays on the right and, I don't know, someone else plays on the left instead. Although, looking at the team, Mudrik's been pretty bad, and if Nkunku's not going to play, maybe Neto will just be on the left and Madueke on the right. But at some point, it could be Jackson up front, João Felix in the 10, which means Palmer would have to move back to the right. I don't mind Madueke as a punt, but I just think long-term there's maybe a few too many question marks. But the fixtures are so good for Chelsea. I don't hate that whatsoever. I think Gibbs White is quite nice for this week because you know he's nailed on, he's on penalties. You've got no concerns over him missing games. But after Wolves at home, it's Liverpool away and Brighton away, which is not necessarily ideal. And game week 7 is Chelsea away. So that's why I went for Smith Rowe instead of Gibbs White. And then the other 6.5s people are looking at, Mitoma, same thing as Minter. I would just ignore him because of the fixture this week. And then Savinho at Man City has looked incredible so far, and West Ham away, Brentford at home are good. I don't mind him as a punt. All I will say is, at some point, Foden's got to come back into that team. Now, is he just going to play central and one of De Bruyne or Bernardo Silva's going to miss out? Possibly. Could it be that Foden just misses out for the next while? That could happen. Could Foden go and play on the left instead of Doku and Savinho stays in the team? All these things are possible, but again, there are doubts long-term about the minutes because it's Man City and they've just got so many options. So if you're going to take a massive punt, Savinho is probably the one with West Ham away and Brentford at home, but you cannot put him in expecting guaranteed minutes. That's all I would say. So I think for most people, you're going down in price to Smith Rowe or Rodgers. They're probably the two best options. So very annoying on Nkunku. Got it wrong. Unfortunately, that happens. I still believe at some point he could be a good option, but that is not right now. That's why I've sold him. That's the options I would go for. Let me know in the comments below if you think I've missed anyone. So I thought I'd look at the points predictions over on Fantasy Football Hub for midfielders priced at 6.5 million or under, just to see what they're recommending and also to see if I've missed anyone. So this is for the next 4 game weeks 3 to 6. Leon Bailey is someone I didn't even mention just then when I was talking about Nkunku replacements. I do like him. And I think fixtures-wise, he's definitely better than like a Gibbs White. Arguably even better than Smith Rowe as well. Leicester away, Everton at home, Wolves at home, and Ipswich away. I'm just a little bit worried about his minutes around Champions League. He's the kind of player that needs to be managed. I don't think he can play midweek weekend for very long. But I think for one game like Leicester away, and then maybe if you're wildcard in game week 4, Leon Bailey arguably is the pick of the bunch to go for from Nkunku. Then they've got Hwang from Wolves, which I'm not convinced about. The fixtures aren't terrible. Forest away, Newcastle at home, Villa away, Liverpool at home. But I'm not sure I would go there. Then it is Semenyo, for anyone looking at that. Doku, a bit like Savinho, just will he keep his place in the side. Then Brereton Diaz, again, another 5.5 like Smith Rowe you could consider. Then Madueke. Then Elanga, who's dropped in price to 5.4. So if you did Nkunku to Elanga, you would still have your million. I would just always be worried a little bit about rotation, and then it's Gibbs White who's nailed on. So if you want to check out stuff like that for other positions and prices, you can do it. Like, it's fully customizable, so you can go to more expensive players, you can go to higher game weeks, whatever you want to do. And if you also want to use all their other tools, you can sign up today. Link in the description below, 50% off at the moment. So we've got to talk about Ollie Watkins, 2 blanks in a row, but maybe what's more worrying with him is the early substitutions. So in game week 2, he did get more minutes than in game week 1, which is what I was expecting, but not by as much as I thought he would. So 61 minutes against West Ham in game week 1 and 64 against Arsenal in game week 2. So there's obviously something not quite right there in terms of his fitness, because we saw last year just how much Watkins was used. And of course, he was away for the Euros. He didn't play many minutes for England, but I guess he didn't have as much of a pre-season as everyone else. He didn't play a single minute in pre-season. That has to be said. So his minutes are going up a little bit, but you really want to see him start pushing kind of 75, 80 plus sometime soon. My general thoughts with Watkins are, because the fixtures coming up are really good. Leicester away, Everton at home, Wolves at home, Ipswich away, Man United at home, Fulham away, Bournemouth at home. That is a great run between game weeks 3 and 9. I still think he's a really good option, but I think if you've got him, you keep him. I cannot see why you would sell him before Leicester at home. Yes, he might get subbed early again, but he can do enough in those minutes to get you returns. We saw against Arsenal, he should have had 2 goals. I know it was a great save from Raya for the second one, but I think Watkins should have put that away. And the one in the first half, I believe it was, I don't know how he's missed it, right? So he did get chances even in that game, and obviously things would look a little bit better if he'd put that away. So I think if you own him, he's probably not your highest priority to sell, and Leicester away is a decent fixture. In terms of buying him, if it was your original plan, or if you're wildcarding this week, I still don't mind it, right? On wildcard, you'd probably just about go for Watkins over Isak, I think, for the little bit of extra money with the fixtures that Villa have got. But I'm not sure I would bring him in if you weren't already planning it. I think I'd give him the international break and then maybe reconsider it from game weeks 4 onwards. It's not that he's a bad transfer in this week. I just can't be that certain about what his minutes will be. Like, I feel like if he comes off at 70 minutes, that wouldn't be that surprising given what we've seen in the first couple of games. And that might be enough to get returns, as I've said. Like, he will get chances, but it's not quite the... He's not quite the FPL option we were really expecting right now. And so maybe he just needs that international break to recover. He's probably not going to play a huge amount of minutes for England, you would imagine, because Harry Kane, if he's fit and available, usually plays, and it's Nation League's game. So he should get a bit more time off just to start building up that fitness. So I'd be a little bit worried about Watkins right now, but not enough to sell him if I had him, but maybe enough to put me off buying him until after the international break. So anything Erling Haaland can do, Cole Palmer can do just as well. Haaland got a hat-trick and 17 points. Palmer against Wolves got a goal and a hat-trick of assists, also finishing on 17. A nice reminder of just how good he is and also why he finished on 244 points last year. And that's caused a lot of people to transfer him in. He's currently the 3rd highest transferred in midfielder behind Smith Rowe and Madueke. And he is a great option, but I would also say just calm down a little bit. We already knew he was good. So there's probably a reason why he wasn't in your team straight away. Possibly just because of the Man City game in game week 1. And now you've seen what he's done against Wolves. You want him for Palace at home, Bournemouth away, West Ham away, Brighton at home and Forest at home, which is the next 5 fixtures for Chelsea. Perfectly reasonable. If you can get him in for free, I absolutely don't hate it. But just remember that Son has just gone and got 16 points in the last game. Saka's on a goal and assist from game week 1, an assist in game week 2. There are lots of other players that are doing really well. There is not necessarily a need for an overreaction to take those kind of players out. Like, I wouldn't be removing Saka, Salah, Haaland, etc. to go and get Palmer. Son maybe, because it's Newcastle away and Arsenal at home next 2 fixtures. But for most people, the players you've got in your squad are probably already good enough. So it's not that Palmer is a bad transfer in. He's absolutely not. If you want to go for him, you should. He's going to get plenty of points over the next 5 weeks. All I'm saying is nothing has really changed. We already knew he was a good option. There was a reason why you didn't go for him straight away. One move that I saw people considering on the stream last night, which maybe they're priced out of now because of Nkunku, was Isak and Nkunku to like a 4.5 million forward like Jebison and bring in Palmer in. Again, I don't mind that kind of move, but you are weakening your overall squad by doing that. And there is still part of me that just thinks, look at everything that's happened in the first 2 game weeks, players losing their place and stuff like that. Lots of issues have cropped up for people, and we still want to weaken our squads overall. And like Palmer might go and get you a bunch of points, but if something else happens in your squad, like an injury or a suspension, having Jebison on your bench is not really enough cover, and you're going to be forced into another transfer. So I could see right now, if I wildcarded in game weeks, even this week, right? Let's say a bunch of other stuff goes wrong and I decide I don't want to just make one transfer, I want a wildcard, or game week 4, I could see myself going for a no Haaland draft with like Salah, Saka and Palmer or something like that. But I would absolutely make sure I've got good cover on the bench. I wouldn't want to be destroying that part of my squad. I just don't think it works very well. So nothing more than that to add. Palmer's great. If you want to bring him in, absolutely good transfer. But I think for most people, there's probably not a rush to react to the score yesterday and bring him in because you've probably got a pretty good squad. So I want to talk about João Pedro as well, because I think in that game against Man United, he's shown a glimpse of why he could be incredible value this season. Got his goal, finished on an 8-pointer, is still only 5.5 million, and takes penalties for Brighton as well. At least we assume he's still first choice penalty taker under Gjertsås. And I'm not saying that anyone should go out and buy him for Arsenal away, but possibly if you're doing some kind of combination move where you're removing a forward and bringing in a Cole Palmer, but you've got a little bit more money to spend, 5.5 for someone like João Pedro could be decent long term, not necessarily for game week 3 against Arsenal away. And the reason I wanted to highlight him is because I think the minutes in the first 2 games are pretty encouraging moving forward. So against Everton, it was 81 minutes, and obviously they were winning that game pretty comfortably at that point, and Everton were down to 10 men, so there was no need to leave him on. And against Man United, he played the whole game. So FPL have it down as 90 minutes, but he played 98. And when Welbeck went off, João Pedro stayed on, and João Pedro moved into the number 9 position. Now, long term, I'm not saying João Pedro is the perfect pick because Ferguson will get fit as well, and all of a sudden you've got João Pedro, Welbeck, and Ferguson that can play number 9. But obviously, João Pedro can also play as a number 10, and he could even play wide if Gjertsås wanted him to as well. I'm not saying he would get in ahead of Mitoma, but he's versatile, right? And he's on penalties, and he's cheap. So if he does miss, not even miss the odd game, but if he does get reduced minutes at some point, he might still be good value for 5.5. So this is really one to keep an eye on from game week 4 onwards because Ipswich are home and Forest are home. But he's just such a good price. And also the fact that he plays for Brighton rather than like I think Armstrong, for example, at Southampton's not a bad pick either. But Southampton is probably not going to score a huge amount of goals this year, whereas Brighton will. I think João Pedro being in and around that is good. And also I think he just played really well against Man United. Not necessarily doing a lot of stuff that's good for FPL, not a huge amount of shots or chances created, but Man United did defend pretty well for most of that game. So I think those chances being created and the shots and stuff will come in the easier games. And Gjertsås kind of talked him up a little bit. Now he's never going to put a player down, and Brighton do have a lot of competition for attacking places now. But I think as it stands, João Pedro is right up there in the pecking order, and the fact that he can play multiple positions, I actually think plays into his hands. So good option, maybe worth a consideration as part of a combination move, but for most people, you'll probably just wait until game week 4. So someone suggested last week that because this video goes out early in the week, that I should do a section on price changes just to talk through who might go up or down over the coming days. So let me know in the comments below what you think about that. This is the price changes on Fantasy Football Hub. I'll leave a link in the description below. It's completely free to view this page if you want to check it out. In terms of players that are likely to go up in price tonight, you've got Fass at Leicester, Visser at Brentford, and Lewis at Man City. Personally, I wouldn't rush to bring in Fass. Right? I know he scored and he's a good 4 million option, but there's probably not a rush to bring him in. Right? There's other 4 million defenders you can go for long term. I don't mind Visser, but I'd really want to know what's happening with Tony. The transfer window shuts on Friday, so we'll know ahead of the deadline where Tony's going to be. It looks like he's going to leave Brentford, but Visser's minutes might go down a little bit if he stays. And Rico Lewis, look, he's fine, but I still think longer term you're always going to be worried about his minutes. He's played really well the first 2 games. He may well get a run in the side, but for how long that is, I'm not sure. In terms of players dropping in price possibly tonight, there's a lot, right? And you always see a lot of price drops early in the season. Anderson at Fulham. So for anyone with him in your side, obviously he's now transferred from Palace to Fulham. They've got some good fixtures coming up, so I wouldn't necessarily worry about that. But I guess if you've got 3 other Fulham players already, you're going to be forced to move one of them. And Robinson is definitely better than Anderson, I would say. He's just a bit more attacking. Huang, who we spoke about a little bit earlier, looks like he's going down. Edouard. Watkins, obviously if you want Watkins, don't transfer him in until he's gone down in price. I wouldn't let that affect my decision on whether or not to keep him. I think, yes, it's annoying, but at some point you're going to lose money. And I know I'm sat here having done early transfers 2 weeks in a row for Kwanzaa and obviously now Nkunku, but that's because I believe they're just not good options going forward. I also have Bruno Fernandes and Eze in my team. Like Bruno Fernandes is probably going to go down tonight. There's no way I'm going to transfer him out because I think he's a good option going forward, or at least good enough to keep. And if I just do a quick search for Eze, he's on minus 73%. He's probably going to go down this week as well. But again, I just think he's a good option going forward, so there's no need to react to that. I just think Kwanzaa and Nkunku were kind of done as options. I'm not going to go through every player individually, but just to quickly go through other players that might drop in price. Odegaard, I think he's good this week against Brighton. Jesus, Tony, who could obviously leave. Kudus, Maatsen, Fulkrug. Rashford and Darwin Nunez. And then players close to a Rice, Salah, and Nana at Villa, I would ignore him. Jackson at Chelsea, good option at 7.5. Romero, I just think you either go for Van de Ven or Porro. I wouldn't probably pay 5 million for Romero, although he did get a lot of goals last year, so maybe that's a sign of things to come. And then Rodgers and João Pedro are close to rises too. So that's kind of a look at the price changes, but you can keep an eye on that because people transferring in and out players changes throughout the week. Don't let it massively dictate your decisions. But if it is a player you want to sell that is going down and you know they're just not a good option long term, it might be worth getting rid of them before you lose any value, because value can be important later on in the season. So yeah, price changes there, links in the description to check out. It's completely free. And I'm going to end by going through some notes from the weekend. So Lewis Hall, who started in game week 1 against Southampton, didn't start in game week 2, which is a bit frustrating for owners. For me, there was just too much competition there. Kelly played instead, and if they do sign a new centre-back to partner share long term, then Dan Burn can also play left-back as well. And if Trippier stays, which we'll find out this week once the transfer window shuts, Livramento can also play left-back. So I would just avoid Newcastle defence entirely for now. I've said this quite a lot. I just don't think the fixtures are that good anyway. Any good teams on paper are all away from home, and we've not seen a huge amount from the first 2 games to suggest that Newcastle defence is going to be good. So I would just avoid them. If you've got the likes of Livramento, happy days, you keep for now. You hope that Trippier leaves. If you've got Lewis Hall, there is probably not a need to rush out and sell him if you've got other players you can play instead. But I think it's worth just keeping an eye on that and not buying them if you don't have already. Darwin got minutes, which I think is encouraging for him, of course. Not necessarily an FPL option, right? In fact, don't buy Darwin Nunez. But I just think it increases the competition for those left wing and number 9 spots. And I think if you've got Jota, again, happy days. You got another return from him in game week 2. You're easily going to keep him for Man United. He could have had more returns against Brentford. But I think for anyone that doesn't have him, the longer this goes on, the less of an option I think Jota is. Either way, we definitely reassess from game week 4. If he plays really well again against Man United and gets kind of 70, 80 minutes, maybe he's an option for the good fixtures Liverpool have from game week 4 onwards. But I just think there's too much competition there to go for it. And at some point, Darwin could just start instead. And by the way, Jota could do well against Man United. It's just not necessarily a fixture that you'd want to bring him in for, I don't think. Keep an eye on Semenyo. I already mentioned him earlier. Timber started for Arsenal. He's obviously only 5.5 million, so that is a very cheap way into the Arsenal back 4. That just feels way too risky. Like, he's better than Zinchenko for sure, and I don't think Zinchenko is going to get back in anytime soon, or at least not play regularly. But Timber did get subbed on 78 minutes, and who did he get subbed for? I'm pretty sure it was Calafiori, who came on and played the rest of the game. And he's the one that a lot of people are expecting to play left back longer term. They've basically got 2 good players for that position, and there could be rotation. Maybe at some point we will see Calafiori left centre back and Timber left back, but Gabriel's been so good in that Arsenal defence for a while now. I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon. So Timber, potentially great value, but I think we've got to continue to ignore him. Son played as the number 9 in Solanke's absence, but obviously when Solanke comes back, that's probably not going to happen. And obviously Odegaard started, who's a new signing for Spurs, only 5.5 million, got 65 minutes. But again, once Solanke is back, there's just too much competition for all those positions. So I would just ignore. If you've got Son, I don't mind him being transferred out because it's Newcastle away and Arsenal at home, but that's not a massive priority. He will get chances in that Newcastle game, and you know he's going to start. And then Isak, not many chances so far. I tweeted out this morning, it's quite funny that I appreciate that Newcastle played against Southampton with 10 men for a lot of the game, but he's got 7 points in the first 2 game weeks, and not many people are talking about getting rid of him, whereas I've got Bruno Fernandes on 5 points, only 2 behind, and it's like he's the worst pick anyone's ever made. It's funny how people perceive different players. I appreciate that Isak is probably the better option moving forward. Like, I wouldn't disagree with that. But he hasn't had a huge amount of chances. You look at the numbers, 0.26 XG against Bournemouth, nothing against Southampton. He's picked up 1 assist. It's a bit disappointing, but I think, as always, I'm not prepared after 2 games to just write him and Newcastle off. And with everything going on at the moment, for most people, he's not going to be a priority sell. And if you have got Isak and the rest of your squad looks great, then you probably just roll the transfer, even if you've already got 2, and have 3 for game week 4. Because Spurs at home is not a bad fixture. They will get chances in that game. And if they do improve, he's then got Wolves away, Fulham away. Not that bad. Is he someone that I'm going to have on wildcard if I go in game week 6? Probably not, to be honest, because the fixtures get a little bit rougher. But right now, I think he's fine. just a little bit disappointing so far. If you've enjoyed that video, give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast, 5-star rating and a follow is always great too. Make sure to check out Fantasy Football Hub. Price change is completely free. Link in the description below. 50% off if you want to use all the tools as well. I'll be back tomorrow, I think, with transfer tips. Possibly a video later today. Let's see what happens. But either way, plenty of content to come throughout this week, throughout the season as well. So join me for that, and I'll catch you again soon.